right. Good afternoon, good evening, everyone, wherever you happen to be in the world today. Thank you so much for taking time out of your day, out of your week to attend this latest bootcamp session called Winning Strategies for Pricing and Selling MDR. So if you have never attended any of my boot camps before, my name is Stefanie Hammond. I am the head nerd that's responsible for all things sales and marketing related here at N-able. I've been with N-able for a little while, about to celebrate my 20-year anniversary in November. So I had a lot of different roles at N-able during my tenure there in sales and account management. And then I moved into the head nerd role about 4 years ago now. So if we're not connected, or if you don't know how to get a hold of me, I have my email there along with the QR code to connect with me on LinkedIn. So hopefully you'll reach out. And joining me today, just for the beginning part, I do have Lewis Pope, who is our head security nerd. So Lewis, I'll let you introduce yourself to everyone. You're on mute again. You did that this morning too.
Well, better to be muted than not sometimes.
Sure.
But yes, I'm Lewis Pope, one of the head nerds at N-able. I'm Steph's counterpart. My focus is on security, very much the practical implementation of security controls, best practices, the day-to-day of delivering security services. I do not have as much time with N-able as Steph does. I've only been here for the past 6 years. Prior to that, though, I started out in the MSP space myself. I started as a bench technician, worked my way up, ended up as a service manager, eventually helping a break fix operation mature into an MSP over 6 years there. But now I'm here as a resource for our partners at N-able. And if you need to reach out to me, you can find me. My email address is on the screen, as well as reaching me out on LinkedIn, the security post, very easy to find.
So looking at what we're going to cover off in today's session, really, we have it broken down into 3 parts. Part 1, Lewis is going to talk about what is N-able MDR. He has several boot camps that he's delivered already on the topic. I think he's been on some different podcasts and stuff talking about it. But if this is your first time hearing about N-able MDR, he'll spend kind of a few moments just kind of introducing you to what N-able MDR is. Then we're going to get into, well, how do you price it? And then how do you sell it? And basically the goal of today's bootcamp is, if you have N-able MDR and you're looking to win your first set of business or your first set of clients, how do you do that? So how do you get started? And then how can you use N-able MDR to increase your average deal size and increase the amount of MRR that you are currently generating from your customers? So what I'll do is I'll just pass it over to Lewis, who will give a brief introduction to what N-able MDR is all about. Over to you, Lewis.
Thank you, Steph. And I always tend to start talking about N-able MDR in a let's define this, because marketing buzz is a thing, and what comes through marketing is not always what you understand something to be. But if you do need the technical rundown of N-able MDR, a technical demonstration, view the platform, how does it operate? Check out either the daily demos that we have. You can find those at n-able.com/product demos, and those are purely technical demonstrations. If you're looking for a more applications-based view of, well, what can I do with N-able MDR? How can this improve my efficiency in my operations? Check out n-able.com/events, and you can find some upcoming boot camps that I'll be doing around N-able MDR, or you can find previous recordings in the N-able U from previous sessions. So defining N-able MDR, really what is it? Well, just what it is managed detection and response. But when you start pulling back the layers, I like describing it more as the functions that it can actually achieve for you. And it gives you this full pipeline of a lot of individual distinct capabilities that have usually traditionally been treated as individual components that you source separately and then try to mash together. What we're giving you with N-able MDR is a streamlined pipeline of your SIM to an XDR to SOAR capabilities that is then going into a 24/7 SOC operation that's then allowing you to deliver on remediation, auditability, and compliance. But the power of it is a streamlined process that's going to handle all of this in one pipeline. So time to deployment, time to skill up, time to push it out and start generating margins on it is going to be a lot shorter than trying to grab these individual components and build out your own service. Next, so to kind of help contextualize this for anybody that is not on the security side or the operation side, maybe you're more on the sales side. This is a sales focused boot camp, or you're more on the management side. I like to talk about what does the path to recovery look like in different models of operation. If you still have not made the change from endpoint security solutions or traditional AV to a modern EDR solution, this slide here does a lot to explain why that's important to make that change now. 2 clicks. And these are simply a demonstration of, these are all of the functional steps that happen between your endpoint security solution discovering a threat to the eventuality of you dealing with it and applying lessons learned. But at some point in that workflow, you have to begin an investigation. Your engineers, your technician, your incident response team, they have to investigate the event, which means they need intelligence, they need data, they need telemetry, they need analytics. And if you're using a legacy AV solution or simply a regular endpoint security solution, that means they're not getting that from there. They are going to have to use other tools, other forensics capabilities, because most of the time, a normal AV is only going to tell you a time, a date, a drive location for a malicious file, a generic descriptor name for whatever the AV flagged it as, and that it killed in quarantine. That's about all the useful information you're really going to get from those types of solutions. So if you want to know, well, were any other additional modifications made to the system during, before, or after this threat event, that all has to come from other tools and other sources. Whereas if you have a modern EDR solution like N-able EDR, it's all already there in the dashboard, available for your responders. They don't have to spend 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 30 minutes, 2 hours trying to gather logs and information from multiple different sources. 2 clicks. And that also means that, well, once comes time to fix whatever was done, they've got the intelligence, they have the telemetry, they see that there was modifications made to a system prior to a threat event being detected. A scheduled task was created, registry keys were modified, values were modified. Well, with legacy AV, that means manual intervention. You have to run a repair tool, a cleanup utility, a system restore. You have to copy good values out of a registry hive from one location back to the other to the compromised system. It's a lot of extra steps. Whereas with N-able EDR, it's already done by the agent for you. As soon as the agent detects an event, you can have it automatically, with no human intervention, the investment of no human resources, automatically remediate those changes or modifications that were made to a system, usually in sub-seconds. 2 clicks. Also the same with if files were modified during a threat event. With legacy applications, that means going and restoring a copy of a good file from a backup somewhere else and putting it back in production. Whereas with a modern EDR that supports it, it's simply an automated action of the platform to revert any modified files back to their previous versions using, in the example of N-able EDR, protected VSS snapshots on the system. So again, faster time of getting things done without the cost of the time or the human body to get it done. 2 more clicks, or 3. And that gets us down to kind of 2 different end scenarios. If you have regular AV or endpoint security, you don't really have the confidence in being able to say, yes, we know everything that happened. You kind of have to make that educated guess statement of, We don't know everything that happened, but we're pretty sure that it's fine. We don't have a record. We don't have an audit trail that we can really use to speak to it, but we're pretty sure it's fine. Versus if you have a modern EDR solution in place, it's like, no, we have high quality telemetry and analytics data. We know all the modifications that were made to the system, and we have a record of that, and we have a record of the remediations showing that those modifications were reverted back to their prior state. And those two end states are significantly different. They represent differences in efficiency in your workflows and your processes, but also it represents a different level of risk exposure for you as a business. Another click or two. And that's just the endpoint selection. So all we just talked about there is everything involved in just the endpoints. But nowadays, that's not enough. Your estate that you are required to protect as an MSP is much, much larger. It is your network appliances. It is the cloud resources, your SaaS, your IaaS, your identity management platforms, your security platforms, your anything really that can produce a log. You need to be dragging all of that information from those separate sources, putting them in one location so it is actionable for you. That is the SIM functionality of N-able MDR. And then once that's all centralized in a location, the intelligence can be applied to it, whether that's threat intelligence feeds, dark web monitoring, user and behavior analytics, data science rules, AI, machine learning rules. All of that is being put towards that wealth of telemetry to perform analytics so that useful, meaningful alerts can be risen to the SOC. So the SOC can engage for it on your behalf 24/7, 365, and not just responding to the alerts, but also doing threat hunting activities so that they can discover things and scenarios where they need to apply remediations, whether those are through automated SOAR actions, such as locking down a user account because that user account was used to authenticate to a VPN appliance from a foreign IP address, or a more hands-on approach where the SOC is investigating an event, notices that there's lateral movement in an environment, and then reaches out and isolates that device that is the source of that lateral movement. And that all gets facilitated because it is in a single pipeline, it's a single platform. That means all of this is auditable and reportable. You have that single source of truth, not only for the telemetry of everything in your client's estate, but also your actions, the actions of the SOC. So whenever somebody asks, is MFA enabled on all of these users in this tenant, you can go produce a report that will let you know that. You need to know all of the modifications that were made to firewall appliances in a time period. You will be able to go generate a report for that. And that's the probably, especially if you're on the operations or security side, this sounds great. That's wonderful. If you've never been on that side of the house though, you might think that, well, that sounds like table stakes. That's something that you should be able to, it absolutely is, but it is a challenge that requires typically a lot of effort, a lot of time, a lot of skills, and usually more than one solution to do all of these things. N-able MDR is giving that streamlined process to handle it from the beginning to the end with limited resources and staff.
Awesome. Thank you, Lewis. So again, I wanted to bring Lewis in just to kind of give that brief overview of what N-able MDR is. Again, if this is the first that you're hearing that N-able has this new product and this new service that we launched. So any questions, if you have it around, how MDR works or some of the more technical specifications or questions that you have around it, just throw it into the question panel and I'll make sure to get that over to Lewis if for some reason I am not able to answer that. So now that we talked a little bit about what MDR is, I want to now address probably the #1 question that I typically am getting from MSPs around that. And you're talking to one of our sales reps, maybe you're talking to one of our PSMs, and you're asking them, well, how do I price N-able MDR? And I think this is a question that I get on at least a daily basis, whether it is from a partner in an email or in my office hour sessions, maybe they've reached out to me on LinkedIn. And so let's talk about how do we actually price N-able MDR. So although we are talking about how do we price N-able MDR today, when it comes to pricing out any new service or any new tool set that you might be introducing into your MSP, whenever I get that question, how do I price X, Stefanie? How do I price EDR? How do I price backup? How do I price Passportal? Because I get those questions as well. My immediate response is, well, who are you selling to? And who are you targeting for this new product or service? And in the case of MDR, I want to ask you, well, who are you looking to sell MDR to? Because depending on what type of organization you're going to be selling MDR to, that's really what's going to guide what you should be charging for it. And when we're looking at the MSP space, there's really two distinct customer types that MSPs could be selling N-able MDR to. And the first customer type is that traditional managed services client type. And when I talk about traditional managed services, I'm talking about an organization that doesn't have any internal IT involved. There's no in-house IT. So they're typically a smaller organization, maybe, less than 80 employees, 75, 80 employees, and they don't have any internal IT. So your MSP is coming in and you're offering outsourced IT services. And you are, in fact, agreeing to becoming 100% responsible for the care and protection and management of that organization's network. And if that's the case, if that's what you're signing up for, then it's a packaged bundle of services that your MSP should be selling them. For traditional managed services, there's no such thing as selling a la carte. We don't sell N-able MDR in a silo. It's just too risky because of the amount of responsibility that your MSP is agreeing to take on. This isn't a tool sale when we're dealing with a traditional managed services client. We're not reselling MDR, by marking it up to this type of client. But what we're going to do, and what I'm going to go into, is we need to bundle this into a package program that includes a variety of other security tool sets, consulting services, best practices, beyond just the N-able MDR service. And I do have a whole 3-part bootcamp series targeted toward this called Building Security Programs. We're going to be referencing some of those slides today in this bootcamp. But in that bootcamp, I call this package program the Advanced Security Package. But you can obviously name it whatever you want. But if we're planning on targeting larger organizations, like maybe we're going to move up market and we're going to start targeting mid and upper enterprise organizations, those that, they're probably 100 employees or more, and there's likely an internal in-house IT person, staff, department, then that's considered a co-managed client. And we price and sell MDR very differently to a co-managed type of client. So in the case of co-managed services, it's absolutely appropriate to sell in an a la carte manner. It is okay to sell tool sets on an individual basis as part of the co-managed model, because you as the MSP, you're not ultimately responsible for the organization's network. The internal IT department or the internal IT director or VP of technology, again, whoever is there in-house, that's their responsibility. So in the co-managed model, your MSP is really just offering to come in, form a partnership with them, and take over a component of the internal IT department's workload. So yes, you could sell a package bundle of security services to a co-managed client, but typically the co-managed relationship starts off more in a piecemeal type of manner. You come in, you offer a service. Typically we see patch management as being kind of that foot in the door service for co-managed services. So you offer to take the patch management function off of the shoulders of the internal IT. So you do that really well, you're proving yourself, and then you work to start strengthening that relationship with that internal IT staff. And then once you've kind of crossed that threshold, then you can start bolting on other services and selling them other services on an individual basis. But it all depends on what that IT department needs from you based on whatever gaps they may have in terms of technical staff, resources, expertise, knowledge, that type of thing. So I wanted to kind of start off really laying that groundwork, because this is an important distinction to make, because depending on the type of organization that you're targeting and whether there is that presence of an internal IT administrator person or not, that is what's ultimately going to determine what you sell them and then what you charge for them. And again, we're talking about N-able MDR today, but you can take out MDR and, say any other product. Again, backup, EDR, Passportal. So let's look at how we're going to price MDR for the traditional managed services client type. And to do this, we need to figure out our ideal client profile type that would be best suited for a package program that includes MDR as part of that offering. Because again, for this type of client, for the traditional managed services client, we're not selling them a tool. We're not selling them MDR in a silo. We're not selling them EDR, backup, none of that. What we want to do is build and offer them a program that contains the right set of services and features and that maps to what we're trying to achieve. And not every client is going to be a candidate for MDR or a package program that contains MDR in it. It isn't going to be, as much as we want to sell it to everyone, I think initially it's not going to be for everyone. But the best types of customers to target for a package program that contains MDR in it are those that we would classify as a medium risk business to high risk business. And we look at this from a risk rating scale, because depending on the customer's overall risk rating, that's going to help determine what type of package program that we build and that we sell to them. So when we look at a medium to high risk organization, one that would benefit from an MDR package program that has MDR in it, we're looking at organizations that, if they reside in a regulatory industry and they have requirements of that industry to demonstrate improved compliance to auditors, they should have a package program that has MDR in it. So we're looking at companies that are in banking, financial sectors, healthcare, education, government. All of those organizations should be positioned an advanced security program that has MDR in it. These organizations are considered high risk businesses, and we should be reminding them of that when we're starting to sell this to them. Or maybe you are dealing with organizations that maybe they're not necessarily in a regulated industry, but maybe they're larger in terms of their size, in terms of their revenues. And so if they're accumulating vast amounts of customer data, vast amounts of financial data that would be attractive to adversaries, they would be a great target for an advanced security package with MDR in it. If they have employees that would have access to this vast amount of data or this valuable intellectual property, or if it's a company that maybe they have extensive partnerships or relationships, strategic relationships with other large key organizations, and so their employees very likely would have access to that type of valuable information, they would be a great candidate for an advanced security program with MDR in it. Or if through your conversations, it's a business that, should they be breached or should they experience some sort of ransomware attack that was successful in stealing their data, if that would be detrimental to that business, kind of resulting in irreparable harm or even a possible extinction event for that organization, they would also be a really good candidate to target for an advanced security program that has MDR in it. So based on the risk ratings, that's what's going to help us determine what type of program we should be going to market with, and that we should be targeting those very high risk customers and prospects. And so again, as I mentioned, that program that we've designed, we're calling it the Advanced Security Program. It is that program that we would use when we're targeting any organization in the financial and banking industry, healthcare, schools, the education vertical, state, local governments. Again, any organization where the breach impact would be high. Or maybe the prospect tells you, you know what, our number one priority, if we happen to get breached, is we have to get our doors back open as quickly as possible. We have to get our employees back to work ASAP. And so the return to operations objectives, so their RTO objectives, would be high. This is the program that should be positioned and sold to them. And with the advanced security program, we're not just focusing on securing the end users. We're not just focusing on securing the endpoints here, but what we're doing is we're expanding our scope of services to provide better security protection coverage for the customer's entire network. Because breach attempts, they just don't solely happen at the endpoint device level. So in this advanced program, not only are we looking at the endpoints, but we're also including threat monitoring and detection and protection services for all the network devices. So the routers and the switches, you know, firewalls, SaaS applications, VPNs, cloud infrastructure like M365, AWS, Azure, that type of thing. And so when we look at what would be included then in this advanced program targeting these high-risk organizations, the focus of the program is really designed where we want to cover each of the 6 layers that surround a customer's employees and its data. Because again, we're moving on beyond the endpoint. This isn't just focusing on the endpoint. So yes, we are protecting the device layer with this program, but we're also aiming to protect, you know, the application layer, the people layer, the network layer, the internet and the perimeter layer. And now we have to incorporate the cloud layer because attack attempts, they can occur via the cloud as well. So cloud security is a critical feature of this program. And so if we go and look at the type of services that are included in the advanced program, and hopefully you notice that this is aligned to the NIST cybersecurity framework. So if we first look at the identify function, with the advanced program, we do want to conduct a monthly security assessment on the customers and network. Also, yes, we're going to be including the monitoring and tracking of the customers, you know, hardware and software assets. But in this program, we're also including additional monitoring and asset discovery capabilities through the installation of the SentinelOne Ranger agent as well. And so if you're not familiar with the SentinelOne Ranger agent, the benefit of including this is that it's going to alert you whenever a new device that doesn't have a SentinelOne agent on it, like IoT devices, camera systems, that type of thing, has connected into the network that you're going to be monitoring. And so when it does, you're going to be notified so that you can then take corrective actions, either by, you know, maybe blocking it from the network or working to approve it and then adding it to your scope of work. And this is really important from a security perspective because you can't protect what you don't know about. And so you can't have rogue devices being connected to your customer's network without alerting you to their presence, because that just increases the chances of the organization falling victim to an attack. So if you're not familiar with the SentinelOne Ranger agent, you do have to have EDR in the environment on the device, and then the Ranger agent is an add-on to that. That question came up in this morning's boot camp, so just preemptively putting that out there. And then when we look at the protect function, you know, this is where we're conducting, you know, pretty much everything that you're used to doing today, right? It's that routine infrastructure, preventative maintenance, and all the servers, the firewalls, the switches, the routers. This is where we're doing all of our patch management activities for Windows, third party on all Mac and Windows devices. And then we have a variety of different security tool sets that we're going to be implementing and using that are really designed to protect each of the 6 layers that exist between the customer's data and the outside world. So if we look at the perimeter layer or that internet layer, this is where we want to make sure that we're including web security. So maybe you're looking at N-able's DNS filter. This is where we're also looking at like mail security, mail filtering protection services, maybe possibly using N-able's MailAssure product. This is where we also want to make sure that we're including dark web monitoring. And this is actually a capability that's built into N-able's MDR service. So you might be able to, if you're using another dark web monitoring product today, you might be able to get some cost savings there because dark web monitoring is built into the N-able MDR service. Then at the people layer, we have password management, password security, possibly looking at and using N-able's Passportal product. We also want to make sure that we're enforcing MFA. Also, we want to make sure that we're including security awareness training. Anti-phishing training is very important, and this is where you're likely going to be bringing in the training services from a third party, whether it's Breach Secure Now or KnowBe4 or two popular companies that partners are using. Then at the application layer, we're building in vulnerability management. At the device layer, this is where we're building in device disk encryption. This is where we are including EDR, like an endpoint detection and response. So here we're going to be using our N-able Sentinel-1 agent because we also want to make sure that we're building in the Ranger to catch those IoT rogue devices that might be coming in. And then we also want to make sure that we're including additional guidance, best practices, and support when it comes to things like data access controls, application controls, helping our customers with, creating their security policies and enforcing those security policies. And then when we look at the detect function, this is where the N-able MDR gets folded in, and we're including it here to provide that deep visibility, that continuous threat monitoring, the detection services that are needed to detect any sort of unusual activity within that client's environment that's outside of normal end user behavior. And so it's now via the MDR service where we'll then be able to correlate all that telemetry data that's coming in that Lewis was talking about in his opening remarks. And in the event of attack, we're going to be able to help investigators because we have all that telemetry data, understand how that attack occurred, how did it roll itself out, what is needed to be done to avoid succumbing to that kind of attack again in the future. And all of that insight is going to be derived from the N-able MDR SIM that's been built into the advanced package. And then when we look at the respond function, for N-able MDR, not only are we including all of the automatic SOAR responses, and I think there's 15 or 16 different built-in SOAR responses that can be relied upon, but if needed, there's also the human intervention piece that is included as well. So, it doesn't work like, maybe some of the other MDR services out there where notifications, kind of get thrown over the fence to your MSP for you to address. With our MDR service, the N-able SOC team is going to handle that, but they'll keep you in the loop. And if there's any communication that needs to be made to the customer, they'll work with you to deliver that. But what it really does is then lighten the load on your existing team. And then for the recover function, we're going to continue to focus on including services that work to improve those return to operations objectives, those RTO objectives for employees in the event that something does happen and they're knocked offline or they happen to lose access to their data and they need it back. So this is where we are building in backup services. And I'm amazed at, when I have conversations with partners and they will still tell me that backup is optional. Backup is an add-on. I just had a conversation yesterday with an MSP that told me, yeah, backup is an add-on. It's not part of our standard package. But backup needs to be, it's your last line of defense. And so we want to make sure that we're backing up all of the servers, all of the workstations. If you have, M365 there, making sure that we're backing up the M365 tenant. And this is where you could be using N-able's Cove data protection services. But that we're also including, backup recovery testing, standby image, making sure we're helping them with their disaster recovery planning in the event something does happen. And then we're also including the 365-day data retention of the MDR ingestion data. And this is really often needed for organizations that do have to adhere to some sort of regulatory compliance. So we're satisfying those requirements by building in that 365-day data retention. And then for the consulting and the reporting services, again, we're focusing on targeting organizations that have certain compliance standards they have to fall under. So we're including compliancy consultant, enforcement in this. Our MDR service has a compliancy insights module that's built in, so you'll be able to leverage that. And then making sure that you are meeting with your customers that are in this program on a quarterly basis, whether you call them quarterly business reviews, I call them executive business reviews, you could call them strategic reviews, whatever title you give them, it is important that you are sitting down with your customers on a quarterly basis, talking about their network, talking about their strategy, their plans, their goals, and making sure that you're building out a tech roadmap and a budget for them to make sure that, whatever their business plans are for the future, their technology can scale accordingly to accommodate those changes. Okay, so a question came in, where can I download that screenshot of the advanced program currently on the screen? I will send it out to everyone, but I also will have a resource that I've created to kind of help as well that I'll be talking about as well, but I'll make sure to get this screenshot over to you as well. Okay, good question. So as I'm sitting there, kind of talking about the advanced program that has MDR in it, you might be thinking to yourself, well, Stefanie, if I have EDR, why do I need MDR on top of that? Really, what's the benefit? And so I did want to spend a few moments kind of discussing the reasons why we now need to layer in the MDR service over top of everything. And the biggest reason is that EDR, so endpoint detection and response, is not MDR, managed detection and response. EDR is really it's an important piece, but it's just one piece of your overall security strategy. Endpoints are only one component of an organization's overall environment. And you really want to think about, what your goal is as an MSP servicing the traditional managed services type of client. Your goal is to properly protect those medium to high risk organizations to the best of your ability. And that is only possible by implementing as many hurdles as possible to prevent the bad guys from getting through. And when I talk about hurdles, I'm talking about things like you're installing firewalls, VPNs, you're doing your patch management activities, you're enforcing MFA, you're installing email and spam protection services, you're providing security training, you're installing and utilizing dark web monitoring services, we're making sure that there's backup in place as our last line of defense, we're putting EDR on the endpoint. All of these pieces are fundamental and are ones that you're likely recommending to all of your customers and that they should have in place. On an individual basis, each of these tool sets on their own are not 100% guaranteed protection. They're not powerful enough to stop the bad actors from worming their way into your customer's network. But once you combine them together in a bundled, layered type of approach, that is when you increase their overall effectiveness in preventing attacks against the network. And unfortunately, the endpoint isn't always the infiltration point for the threat actor. There's a lot of other ways that the customer's network could be breached. And so we need to make sure that we're including security monitoring for those pieces as well from a data breach prevention purpose. So by adding in the N-able MDR service and including it as part of the advanced security program alongside all of those other pieces, including EDR, that's what's going to work to really help strengthen and fortify your defenses even more. Because what the N-able MDR is now going to do, it's going to sound the alarm bells. And it's going to sound the alarm bells almost immediately if it detects that something is off or something's not normal going on within the network. And then when an attack does occur, because it's about if or when, not if, your desire then and your goal is to help the customer recover as quickly as possible. And to help them do that, you and the forensics team, if we have to bring in, in the cyber insurance liability people, they need to have a really good understanding around, what actions are needed to neutralize the attack, what caused the attack to occur in the first place, what needs to be done to make sure that this same type of attack doesn't happen again. And that storyline requires as much data from the environment as possible. And those data requirements extend far beyond the endpoint. So if you're only monitoring the endpoint, we're not capturing the complete picture to help you understand how the attacker was able to get in and access the network and access the data. And you're going to want logs from all of those other components of the organization's ecosystem. We're going to want logs from the firewalls, from the routers, from the switches, from the cloud services there, because that's the only way that you're going to be able to really stitch together what happened. And so by kind of wrapping our advanced program with the MDR service, I almost look at it like we're closing the loop. You're going to be able to extend your security protection coverage beyond what you're currently offering to your clients today if you just have EDR on the endpoints. And you're going to be able to provide your customers, especially those that are higher risk in the regulatory industries, you're going to be able to provide that complete overview, which is not only going to help speed up any forensic investigations that might have to be done, but it's also going to be beneficial in minimizing the impact of the attack. And I think that's probably the most critical piece or the most critical benefit when you're talking to prospects and customers about this. Because if we can minimize the impact of the attack, we're going to be able to get our customers, their employees, and we're going to be able to get their business back up and running much more quickly than without it. So laid out, that we can't sell MDR on an individual basis, talking about how we need to fold it into a program like we just talked about with the advanced security program. But how does that all get priced out? So looking at the components that go into determining your price, especially when we're talking about it from a packaged program perspective, the numbers that you're seeing here, they come from partners that are currently enrolled in our business transformation benchmarking program. So we have this whole business transformation department. It's headed up by Chris Massey, and they talk about operational efficiency. They talk about how to grow your MSP. It's really a good complement to the services that the head nerds do. But part of that benchmarking program is they get our partners that are enrolled to submit data on their MSP. And so this is the data that you're seeing from the best-in-class MSPs that we've benchmarked so far. And when we look at setting our monthly price for our advanced security program, we're breaking that down into three main components. We have our tools costs, we have our labor costs, and then whatever margin goal we want to put into our program. It's generally the labor cost and the margin goal that really sets an underperforming MSP apart from our best-in-class, higher performing MSPs. So looking at our software costs, these are the costs of the tool sets that are needed to deliver the services as we've outlined in the advanced security program. Also, our tool sets could also include, not only the stuff that make up our tech stack, but also we want to include our RMM, our PSA, those tools that we're using to kind of manage the whole MSP department. Tools costs are generally the lowest cost component of your overall price. And from our data, seems to make up between 10 and 16% of an MSP's monthly price of their overall price that they charge. The second component we look at is their labor costs. And this is the MSP's technicians cost. So it's the cost of the engineers that are going to be used to help manage and support the program. And from our data, we're finding that the labor component generally makes up around 22% of the overall price that's charged to customers. And typically, direct labor is the largest component of your program's overall costs. So in order to do what we can to mitigate the impact direct labor has on our overall pricing, this is where you want to make sure that you're optimizing your technicians the best you can, that you're leveraging automation, that you are standardizing your tool sets across the board, that you have defined operating best practices and procedures in place. And my colleague Joe Furla talks a lot about that in his boot camps. He delivers quite a bit on operational efficiency. So if you haven't checked out his boot camps, you can find them on demand within N-able U, or check out the n-able.com/events page, where you can maybe register for some of his upcoming boot camps. And then a few other labor costs that we need to factor into our program price is our executive business reviews, the time that's needed to kind of sit down with each of your clients in the advanced program on that quarterly basis to kind of review their network, again, review their plans, their goals, their objectives, their strategy for growth, and making sure that their technology is aligned to that. Now, some MSPs spend more on tool sets, less on labor, but really kind of the goal from our benchmarking for best-in-class MSPs is to kind of keep your tools and your labor to about 38% of the total price of the program. And then once all of the costs have been identified, that's when we need to think about, what's our target gross margin percentage goal that we want to earn on our programs. And it will depend on a couple of things. Obviously, your overhead costs, so your cost of sales, your admin costs, that type of thing. Also, where you are in the world will probably play a large part in that. But also making sure that we're factoring in appropriate risk premium for the security-specific specialization that you are going to be providing with your advanced security package, and also taking into account the level and the severity of the risk that you are going to be assuming on behalf of the customer. Because again, traditional managed services type of client, you are 100% responsible for the care, protection, and management of that network. So you need to make sure that you're pricing accordingly for that risk that you're taking on for yourself. And so from our benchmarking, we're finding that N-able's best-in-class MSPs, they're garnering, or they're targeting around 62% as a margin goal percentage. But I've seen it higher. I've seen it, 70, 80, 90% for well-established MSPs. So if you're not aware, we do have a costing calculator that can help you with this. If you don't have anything in place today, I've included a copy of that as part of the handouts, how we've come up with the pricing that has MDR in it. In the interest of time, I'm not going to go through how we came up with the pricing for this advanced program, but I do have a separate boot camp that I've delivered last month. It is on the N-able U website that talks about how do you use that pricing calculator to not only price out the advanced security program, but really any program that you want to put together. So if you're looking for a copy of that boot camp, that pricing boot camp, just put pricing boot camp in the question panel, and I'll make sure to give you the link so you don't have to go digging around N-able U for it. But again, drum roll. What are we charging for an advanced security program targeted at the traditional managed services type of client? We're seeing it run between $225 to $250 USD per month per user. But I've had partners tell me that they're selling it at $300, $340 in some cases. But most the range I'm seeing, and when you look at our calculator and you go through the boot camp, it's around $225 to $250 US. Now, there's a couple of pricing caveats that I want to highlight here. The costing exercise that I go through in the pricing boot camp, it's based on using all of N-able's products that we sell, and we're using standard pricing, our full MSRP pricing. So if you're using other tool sets, that's fine. It's the strategy that I want you to focus on. It'd be great if you can use our tools, but at least have the right security stack in place with your preferred tool sets. So if you're using a different set of tool sets, not a problem. You're just going to want to enter those tools cost into your version of the calculator, and that may impact the outcome. But really what you should be striving to do is do what you can to meet that at least 60% gross margin target if possible. Because if you do have fantastic discounts on your tools, I would still enter in the full price anyways, because honestly, the reason you probably got those discounts was due to volume. So if you decide to reduce your volume of a particular product, it is possible that your vendor might remove the associated discounts along with that. So if you base your costing exercises on the full MSRP pricing, then if you lose some discounts because you've decreased some volume, it's not going to hurt your margins all that much. I would rather err and be conservative in terms of my costing exercise. And then lastly, I just used a $50 per hour fully burdened labor rate. You can change this in the calculator. So if your rate happens to be higher because you're using more expensive staff for your area, or if you're in a more expensive area of the world, then this is also going to impact your per user price. But because we are using and promoting N-able MDR as part of this boot camp, the SOC and the SIM service, that's not being handled by you, right? That's being handled by the N-able MDR SOC team. So we don't really need that expensive labor to deliver this program because it's the N-able MDR SOC team that's doing the majority of the work. All right. So now let's look at the other side of the coin. How would we price MDR if we are targeting a co-managed type of client? And you're going to see as we go through this section, it's a very different approach that we're going to be taking. But just like the traditional managed services client type, we do want to make sure that we are defining our ICP, that we're defining our target audience. But in this instance, we're not going to be focusing on selling a packaged program. We could, but we don't have to in this case. We can sell N-able MDR as an individual service because, again, with a co-managed type of client, we're not 100% responsible for the safety, care, security management of the co-managed client's network. The IT director is, whoever is hired, internally to take part in that role. All we're doing here is we're offering to partner with them. We're offering to help with a component of their network management. And in this case, we're offering to help with the security component of it. So going back to our risk rating scale from earlier, the best type of customers to target for this MDR service are those that we would classify as a medium to high risk organization. So again, same as before, these organizations that reside in some sort of regulated industry. So they have requirements by virtue of operating in those industries to demonstrate improved compliance to auditors. So again, we're still looking at companies that, yep, go ahead. Is that you, Lewis?
Yeah.
Do you have something to say?
Can you please join the queue?
Okay.
Because something happened when I was
Lewis, you're on. Can you take yourself, put yourself on mute?
Still in the waiting room, and I was. And sometimes between then and now.
Lewis,
So
put yourself on mute. All right, sorry about that, everyone. So again, we're talking to medium risk businesses, high risk businesses. Our main targets here for N-able MDR are those that are in regulated industries. So again, all the same requirements as before, but the big differentiating factor is there's someone in-house. There's someone that is making up that IT function, that IT department that you're going to be working with. So the responsibility is not all on you. There's going to be defined roles and responsibilities that you want to work within. So I'm not going to go through, all of the services that are included in a co-managed MDR program because Lewis and I did a extensive boot camp on this a couple of weeks ago as part of our co-managed series. So if anybody's interested in getting a copy of the co-managed boot camp where we talked about how do you build an MDR service, let me know and I will get that sent over to you. But feel free to maybe take screenshots of these slides if you like. But really what I want to really focus on is, how do we price out an N-able MDR service when we're targeting someone in the co-managed space. And you can see at $90 per user per month, it's less than what we were charging for our traditional managed services client underneath the advanced program. And this $90 USD per month, we based that on a straw man example of a 100 employee organization where they had a couple of servers, a couple of network devices, and some cloud applications that we are going to be covering. And when we look at what went into the costing of this service, we've built in the cost of, the RMM agent. So whether that's N-central that you're using, whether that is N-central, we've built in the cost of the EDR license, and we've built in the cost of the MDR advanced license. Now, if you start talking to anybody from our sales department, you'll find out that we have two versions of MDR licenses. We have a standard version and we have an advanced version. If you are needing to collect syslog from a device, it is automatically going to trigger the advanced licensing. So given the types of organizations that we're going to be targeting for this program, I have automatically built into the costing structure the cost of the advanced license, because I'm making the assumption that you're going to need to collect syslogs from your prospects' devices. The MDR advanced license is also the best license that supports hybrid environments, where you might have, you might run into an organization that has a mixture of on-prem devices, they have firewalls, VPNs, other network gear, as well as cloud applications. And I feel that with this program, most of your co-managed opportunities that you're going to be targeting are going to have this kind of hybrid type of setup. The advanced license is also the license that really allows you to collect all of that telemetry data from every possible data source in the customer's environment. And as the MSP who's offering to take on the security responsibility on behalf of the IT director, you do want as much data that you can get, and you'll be able to better accomplish that with the advanced license. By comparison, we do have that standard license, but that standard license won't allow you to ingest syslog. Only the advanced license allows you to do that, which is really needed to kind of give you the full breakdown of a security event. Also, as part of our costing, we have again built in the 365-day data retention upgrade on the MDR license to provide kind of further protection coverage beyond what the Microsoft defaults are. And then we've also built in a little bit of time for your involvement outside of what the MDR SOC team would be handling. And this is really, I'm thinking, if you have to do minor config changes, maybe we need to kind of realign some coverage, making sure, all the agents are communicating, that all the devices are enrolled and the logs are being collected, kind of that kind of admin stuff. So building in a little bit of time for that. What's not included in this $90 a month, I have there in red in the box. If we have to do any creation of custom detections or any custom SOAR automated responses that, maybe you're dealing with a unique environment, those are considered out of scope. Out of the box SOAR, the 15 or 16 that are built in, that is included, but anything new that isn't part of that service that would then need to be developed, we can definitely help you with that, but that would be a separate fee that I would encourage you to charge your customers. Also, email, browser security support not included. We're not including any, DNS or content filtering as part of this $90 cost. Doesn't include any sort of vulnerability management or pen testing or any other sort of application controls as part of this $90 a month cost. Those would all be additional services that you can bolt on and offer to your client if you feel through your assessment and through your conversations that those particular hurdles are not being covered, that those pieces aren't in place. Then absolutely, create kind of a packaged program at that place, at that point, a per user cost and charge for that. This also doesn't include true incident response. Outside of what's automatically included with the MDR service. This doesn't include if you have to go on site to do any sort of on-site work. that would be out of scope as well. You know, the idea is because you are partnering with an internal IT department, anything that you feel you need to be on site for, you would just communicate that to them and let them do that work. If for some reason they're like, you know what, we don't have time, we don't have the bandwidth, you know, we got people on vacation or out sick, can you come in and take care of that? Well, that you can, but the understanding is that there's going to be a separate on-site fee for that, or maybe you sell them a block of hours and you just pull from those retainer hours. And again, the reason we don't want to include true incident response, because something does go sideways that requires bodies on site, you don't want to be on the hook for that. So we don't want to include that in the MDR program. Okay. So hopefully through this section and going through these two very different pricing examples, you can see when I get asked that question, what should I be charging for MDR? I can only reply back with, I don't know, it depends, because it wholly depends on who you're selling to and whether or not there's an internal IT person present on site or not. So no internal IT, you're 100% responsible. We're selling them an advanced security package starting at $225 per user per month. If you're targeting a larger organization that has internal IT, we're selling MDR on an individual basis, and that would start at $90 per month. So it depends. Okay, so let's move on to our final section. You know, how are we going to sell N-able MDR? And I just, once again, want to focus on the traditional managed services market segment. So for the traditional managed services market segment, I think the first place to go and try and increase MRR and garner more MRR is to go after your low-hanging fruit. So if you kind of go through your customer base and you know you have clients that kind of deviate what's mapped out in the advanced security package, then I would recommend kind of focusing our initial sales efforts on upgrading and standardizing. Oh, went too fast there. I would really focus on going after those clients and upgrading and standardizing those clients into that program first before trying to go out and start winning, you know, new clients. You know, I'm not saying don't focus on it, but I just think if you know you're still delivering a la carte, you still have break fixed, this might be the easier path to getting some quick wins. So, and by focusing on your existing clients, you've already done all the work, right? It's easier to target your existing clients than to go after net new who don't know anything about you. You know, your existing clients, they already know everything about you. They know your organization. They know your quality of work that you perform. You've built that relationship with them and hopefully that partnership. And so there are great organizations where you can, you know, practice your sales pitch on them. You know, they can act as your guinea pigs. They can give you that constructive feedback, and they can give you that advice for when you begin, you know, to start selling to organizations that don't know you at all. Your existing clients can also help you prepare to deal with some of the objections and some of the pushback that you're likely going to hear. So you can practice how you're going to address that pushback and deal with any objections that you may receive, especially with the changes that you're going to be making to your pricing structure, because it's probably going to be a lot higher than what they're, you know, paying for right now. And you can also use your existing clients to kind of start ironing out all of those technical deliverables. Like if you're, you know, throwing in and enhancing your security stack, this will give you that opportunity to work that out, work out the kinks, work out the onboarding processes to onboard clients into your advanced security program. You know, you can use these customers to provide that real world training for your tech and your service desk, especially if you have introduced, you know, technologies into your tech stack that you weren't using previously. And then from a marketing perspective, we can then use these existing clients, you know, once we kind of get the kinks worked out and everything is working like as designed, we can go back to these customers and we can build case studies around them. We can ask them for testimonials. We can send them over to Google and say, hey, would you mind, you know, doing some Google reviews for us? And this is all stuff that you can post to your website, post to your social media, because that's what's going to be needed. That social proof is going to be critical for when you want to start targeting and selling to new clients when you are ready. And so to help with that planning process, I always encourage you to create what I call a services white space matrix. And the purpose of this services white space matrix is to really give you an idea around, which of your clients are buying a certain set of services from you, but where are you also leaving money on the table because you have clients that aren't buying a certain set of services from you like you would like them to. And then this is going to give you the guidance as to where your sales opportunities are within your existing customer base. And that's going to help direct you to figure out, which clients should you be reaching out to first to speak to them about standardizing on their services and then getting them enrolled into your advanced security program. So if you've never done that type of exercise before, it is dead simple. Really, all you need to do is open up an Excel spreadsheet. Along the top, list out every single MRR service that you sell, maybe individually today. And then down the side, we list out all of your clients. And then for each client, we want to kind of, X off or mark off any of those services that they're currently purchasing from you. And then we want to tally what their total monthly spend is with you for those, subset of services that they're paying for. We also want to make sure that we're indicating what industry or vertical they're in and assign that risk rating because, again, for this exercise, we are primarily targeting those organizations within your base that we would deem as being medium to high risk. And, typically they're high risk if they reside in a regulated industry. Those are really our target clients for an advanced security program. And then we want to rank our customers either by their monthly MRR or by who deviates the most from your new advanced security program so that we can then make our plan as to whom we're going to be reaching out to first. And so again, a very quick, easy exercise to easily highlight for you who has what services are missing so that you know where your upgrade opportunities lie. And then start to make a plan to reach out to every single one of those customers who deviates from your advanced security program and book a meeting with them so you can speak about upgrading them into that new program. This isn't only just needed from a revenue generation standpoint, because I know we're always looking for how can we, garner more MRR from our customers, but it's also needed from an insurance risk mitigation and liability perspective for you as well. Because if something should happen to one of your clients and they end up getting breached, you need to make sure that you've done your due diligence and that you've taken all of the necessary precautions to elevate the protection standards with you, because you need to make sure that you're properly protected from any liability or harm to your reputation. So I encourage you, if you have clients that deviate, schedule those executive business review meetings, those QBRs, quarterly business review meetings, and make a point to bring to those meetings some education pieces. Maybe you bring a security report, there's so many out there, that really kind of highlights and discusses the changing threat landscape. This is information that you can use to help educate your customer on what's happening in the world today. That really works to justify why you're making changes, because you're making changes. You also would like to bring your new master services agreement that outlines the new advanced program, the features, the services that you would like to enroll them in. Obviously bring them a copy of what their new monthly invoice is going to look like. And then you may need to decide if you want to accommodate them if they refuse to sign your new master services agreement, and if this is still a customer that you want to keep, then bring something like a hold harmless letter or some other risk acceptance letter that you get them to sign off on, that clearly outlines, what the consequences are going to be should they get attacked, infected, ransomed, and then where your liability ends with respect to that breach. So you need to have them sign something that's going to shift the risk away from you and pass it over to them. And again, I don't think I can stress that activity enough and stress how important it is that, if you haven't gone through that exercise yet, that you take the time and book those meetings with your customers. Because already in the span of this year, We've had 2 MSPs that have made headlines because they are being sued by one of their customers. And they're getting sued because there's the perception that the MSPs failed to protect them from a data breach. The first MSP made headlines out of California back in March, and then there was a latest one that took place about a month ago. And this time it's an IT consulting firm out of Maine. They're being sued in federal court for a data breach that the IT consulting firm is saying is not their fault. Instead, they're pointing the finger and they're blaming their MSP for failing to secure its network and for exposing it to a breach that impacted more than 1 million of their customers. So the case is still ongoing, but there does appear between the 2 headlines some similar, there's some commonalities between both cases. The first similarity being is they can't tell if the customer had cyber insurance coverage in place, or whether the MSP mandated that their customers put in place their own cyber liability insurance coverage. A second similarity is in both cases, there doesn't seem to be any real contracts in place that explicitly spell out the roles and responsibilities for each company. And what I mean by this is, who's responsible for the cybersecurity protection coverage and what does that entail? In both cases, it does appear that the client assumed that they were being properly protected by their MSP. And I think that's the real issue here. If you aren't speaking to your customers on a regular basis, if you're not having that security and risk mitigation conversation with them, then your customer feels that by virtue of paying you that monthly fee, that you are doing everything to your top abilities to protect their network from cyber attacks. And so if that's not the case, if you know that there's holes, if you know that they deviate from what that advanced program looks like that we talked about earlier, then we need to have that conversation. We need to have that conversation quickly. Because in both articles, what they seem to allude to is in the MSP's mind, these clients never signed up for any of their security services. They never agreed to pay for that additional cyber protection coverage. And so in the MSP's mind, they actually weren't covered like the clients thought they were being covered. So again, just always, as I read both cases and as I follow both cases, it really makes me, kind of wonder, what type of conversations, what type of interactions were those MSPs having with those clients on a regular basis? Were they neglecting to have that all-important risk and security conversation with clients via something like your regular QBRs? And so it really just wants me to pose this question to everyone on the line today. If you look at your own MSP practice, could this situation easily happen to you, right? Do you recognize gaps in your own MSP operations that could potentially open you up to that kind of liability should one of your clients experience a breach and then want to blame you? Because these are really headlines that no MSP wants to be associated with. So again, it just goes to show how important it is that MSPs put the proper measures in place to protect themselves from being named in future lawsuits that are being filed by their customers. And so looking at things like making sure that we have well-defined cybersecurity programs in place that you standardize all of your customers on, especially those that are classified as being medium to higher risk organizations and who do happen to reside in regulated industries. And then making sure that the requirements, we have proper contracts in place, along with detailed statements of work that spell out, your role and responsibility as their MSP, but also that you spell out what the roles and responsibilities of the customers, because they have responsibility as well. And so if you don't have that in your contracts already, kind of that proper verbiage around, limitation of liability and what you're actually responsible for, in your service contracts, then we need to get that in, because when it comes to security and preventing a cyber attack, we all know that nothing is foolproof. Nothing is 100%. And so you do want to make sure that you have the proper messaging in your contracts that really work to limit the amount of liability that your MSP will accept. And we want to make sure that that gets properly communicated out to your customers. And I know in conversations that I've had with MSPs over the years, there are MSPs out there that really pride themselves that they don't make their customers sign contracts because they want to be, you know, and provide the ultimate in flexibility. Might be a noble act, but I really feel that this is creating too much risk and liability for your MSP because the perception is, you know, from your customer standpoint, that you are protecting them. But if they're not paying for those services and there's nothing written down that clearly outlines, you know, what services you are providing to them and that they are paying for, then it becomes really what these two lawsuits are about. We have two companies pointing their fingers at each other. And in the meantime, the MSP's good name and the reputation is kind of being dragged through the mud. And that could definitely hinder your future customer and revenue growth. And then from the client's responsibility perspective, there are MSPs now that are starting to make it a contractual requirement that they must carry their own cyber liability insurance coverage to protect themselves, because those MSPs are beginning to recognize that although you are the MSP, you can't assume and carry all of the liability and the cyber risk for your customers. You know, they are recognizing that their MSP, you can't act as your client's insurance policy any longer. You know, they really need to go and source their own cybersecurity liability coverage, because cybersecurity is really kind of a shared responsibility between both the MSP and the client. And so this is something that you may want to consider as well, and start insisting that your clients obtain their own cyber liability insurance coverage if they don't have it in place already. And I think the nice thing about, you know, maybe putting that mandate in place is, if you put that requirement in place, in order to qualify for the insurance policy, the customer is going to have to be enrolled in your advanced security program, because the requirements listed out, if you've reviewed or read a cyber insurance application form, they're already built in to the advanced security program. You know, the advanced security program that Lewis and I worked on, it's been developed to align to the requirements that are listed out on those application forms. So that type of conversation, that naturally acts as your upgrade path to help you transition your existing clients into that advanced security package. So it's pretty much a win-win if this is something that you might consider building into your MSP. And then again, just really can't stress it enough, just making sure that you're having those regular conversations around cybersecurity with your customers, and that you're educating them on their own cyber liability, and making sure that we're doing our QBRs, our EBRs, and speaking to them about what needs to be done to properly mitigate that risk. Because again, they're assuming you're already doing everything that you can to protect them, and that they're 100% safe. And if you know that's not the case, we need to fix that. Okay. All right, so now let's start talking about how do we sell MDR into the co-managed space. And I think, you know, as much as it is with the traditional managed services client, I think for the co-managed model, education is really going to be the key here. And I think a good place to start promoting your MDR service is via some sort of educational webinar or some sort of in-person event, like a lunch and learn, breakfast and learn, that can be used to really help educate prospects, not only what co-managed IT services are, but how your MDR service is going to be able to help them as a, you know, potential service that you can offer them. You know, so you can bring them into your office, host them at a restaurant. Either way, if you can provide a venue that has good food and refreshments, I think that's a fantastic starting point that MSPs can use to really help jumpstart their new co-managed MDR service offering. Because I think it is amazing what good food and drinks will do at warming up prospects that you've identified would be a good fit for your MDR service offerings. because there's several benefits to Lunch and Learns. The biggest one being that it will help transform your MSP into that authority figure on the subject of co-managed IT services, especially around security and MDR. We all know if you see someone up on stage or delivering a webinar, there's almost that instant credibility that you associate with that. And if you can go and host an event like a Lunch and Learn, that is going to work in a lot of ways to help differentiate your MSP and set your MSP apart from competition in your area if you know that your competition isn't doing anything like this. And I'm not seeing it too much today in the mad masses of MSPs. I'm not seeing a whole lot of MSPs really incorporate the benefits of Lunch and Learns, but the ones that are, they are having some really good success with it. So I do eventually see it growing in popularity. It was almost the norm, I think, prior to COVID, but I think post-COVID, I think there's still a little bit of a delay in some of that uptake there. So if we can go and start, maybe bringing back that concept of Lunch and Learns, this is really going to help you, talk about different perspectives, different options on how your MSP can help their company, deal with maybe some of the technical challenges they might be experiencing, some of the security challenges that might be experiencing. And again, a lot of MSPs aren't doing that. I also think a Lunch and Learn or having that sort of in-person educational event will help dispel the myth that still might be circulating out there with the co-managed IT model. You might come across, if you started talking to organizations about this, you may have the internal IT director come to you and say, you're just trying to take over my job. You're trying to get me fired. You're trying to make me look bad. And that's not the case with co-managed services. And so having an event, you can really work and use that as an angle and say, no, we're a partnership here. We're not coming in to take over. We have no designs to get anybody fired here. So in the interest of time, I'm not going to go through the logistics around how do you market, plan, and execute a Lunch and Learn, but I do have the newest version of the co-managed digital playbook. If you're not aware, this is a resource that we've created. We're on to our third version now. I just published it about a month ago now. I've included it as a document that you can download, but it is a comprehensive resource on everything to do with co-managed services. How do you build, price, market, sell a variety of co-managed services? And I now have the MDR component built in. So definitely encourage you to take a look at that if this is something that you might be interested in. And then with sales comes the inevitable objections. We're going to get pushback. So we do want to make sure that we're role playing and that we're prepared on how we're going to respond when we hear them. So we're going to start again with the traditional managed services market segment first, because even though I'm telling you go after your existing clients first, because we have that relationship, there's still going to be pushback, right? They're still going to throw some objections at us because no one's going to like having services and program changes thrust upon them, especially when those changes are likely going to result in a higher monthly fee. But if we can anticipate these objections, if we can prepare, and if we can practice our responses and provide that good rationale, we have a good chance of overcoming those objections and landing that new contract. So I've outlined the 12 most common objections that you're likely going to hear. Not going to go through all 12 of them today in this boot camp, but I do have a separate boot camp on N-able U that you can find on demand. And it's also coming out in a selling security playbook that should be out later on, hopefully by Friday. But I'm going to just talk about kind of the three biggest ones that I feel that you can anticipate hearing and giving you some options on how to address them. And so the first objection that you will probably hear is, why do I need to change my services that I have with you? I thought I was already protected, and now you're saying that I'm not. So again, we want to play the educational role here. And so if you hear this, why do I need to change my services? What's different? Why do you need to charge me more? We can start off by saying, I'm changing the services because things are very different now than what they were 3 to 5 years ago. And stats show that 60% of businesses that will go out of business 6 months following a cyber attack, and we don't want to be a contributing factor to that. So what we had recommended as security best practices 5, 6 years ago, and even last year, is not what we're recommending to our clients today. And, spoiler alert, we're actually going to be probably having the same type of conversation 6 months from now, a year from now, where I might need to implement some new security services or make some other changes to the security package, because ransomware attacks, business email compromise attacks, phishing tactics, they're just becoming more and more sophisticated now. And so as a result of this ever-changing threat landscape, as your MSP, I need to keep everyone up to date. I need to keep amending my recommendations in order to keep all of my customers' networks, their employees, and their data as safe and secure as possible. And I think it is a really good talk track to use, because we do want to start setting the expectations that your services, they're not going to remain static like they used to be. You're now going on the offensive, and we now want to strive to be as proactive as possible. And that's a good thing. And you want to emphasize that and promote that and use that as a way to differentiate yourself from other MSPs that are out there. And so just to kind of put some illustrations around this, and I can provide this slide to anybody that would like it, but this is a slide that you can use to really help explain to your client how a cyber attack can happen, and to help highlight, how drastically a threat landscape can change. And that's what's necessitating why you're needing to make changes in the services and in the support that you're now providing your customers. So there's a lot of animations that will take you through this on how an attack actually works and how it can worm its way into your client's network. And you can see that it is based on our layered security diagram that we did review earlier. But when you go through this and you kind of see how an attack happens, and you can see its impact, you can see that, the attack is really hitting every layer that surrounds the employees and their data. And in many instances, each layer is being hit more than once. And so because of this reality, we need to really change, what it is that we are offering to our customers. We need to change and update the types of services that we are providing to our customers. And then based on that last slide, when we look at the customer journey, when it comes to security and why things need to change, again, 5, 6, 10 years ago, the traditional MSP's answer to security was AV, patch, firewall, backup. 5, 6 years ago, those services were fine. They provided pretty decent protection coverage. Threats weren't as sophisticated. People were working in offices behind corporate firewalls. And the thought process was, as long as you had a good AV, you're going to be fine. But we now know in today's threat landscape, and just what we kind of went through very quickly in the previous slide around how a cyber attack can happen and its impact, we now understand, that this is no longer enough. And so looking at the layered diagram again, you can see that the old approach of AV, patch, firewall, backup, we have layers that are left underprotected. There are layers that are missing protection coverage completely. They're completely unprotected. And here I'm talking about the cloud layer, the internet layer, and the people layer specifically. And so there's now, in the old model, significant gaps in the customer security coverage, so that old minimum standard of security, it has to be upgraded in order to plug those gaps that have now surfaced. And so this is where you can explain to your customer, why we had to go and develop a program like our advanced security program, so that we can plug those gaps that you're now seeing being exposed, and that your security coverage, it now has to extend far beyond the endpoint. And so you had to make the decision to invest in other security solutions to improve the protection coverage for those 6 other layers surrounding the client's data. And so this is really what we're looking for in terms of, you know, what is needed today to kind of bubble wrap an organization's employees and their network in order to protect the most critical asset outside of its employees, and that's its data. And so that's, again, why things need to change. That's why the old model that maybe you still have customers under of legacy AV, patch, firewall, and maybe backup no longer works. It's no longer sufficient. There's gaps there, and those exposed gaps is what heightens the risk of the client being attacked, especially when you see how sophisticated attacks are getting these days. And so that's why services need to change, and that's why the cost is going up. So again, if anybody wants those slides, I have those, just reach out to me. Another objection that you can anticipate hearing is, wow, this sounds much more expensive compared to what I was paying before. Yes, it is. But I think another way that we can approach this is to demonstrate ROI to the client and help them understand, you know, the true costs of a ransom attack. Because the true cost of a ransom attack, it extends far beyond the actual payment being demanded. You know, there's a lot of other important costs that we need to factor in that we want to make sure that we're highlighting when we get this type of objection. And as far as costs go, experts actually estimate that the ransomware payment, it only represents about 15% of the total cost of the entire ransomware attack. And there was a study that was done by the firm Cybereason, and they found out of the 1,200 MSPs and companies that they surveyed, 66% of them suffered significant revenue loss as a result of a cyber attack, and 53% of them reported significant brand damage. And so that's what we're trying to help our customers avoid with our advanced security package. So the increase in the monthly cost that you're going to be presenting to your customers as a result of the, you know, transitioning them into the new advanced security program, it's going to be peanuts compared to the costs that they could be exposed to from, you know, getting breached, having their data wiped out, potentially unrecoverable, maybe sold, published on the dark web. And, you know, there's a high likelihood that they are going to experience some significant financial hardships, or worst case, they could be even put out of business due to loss of reputation. So how can we demonstrate ROI during the sales conversation to kind of get over that pricing objection? Most businesses that you're going to be dealing with already have an MSP managing their network today. So the ROI conversation is no longer about really illustrating the cost of downtime from an unmanaged network. Downtime these days is actually going to come from a ransomware attack as a result of an underprotected network. And so when we're trying to educate our customers about our new advanced security bundle, and they seem to be flinching at the cost of it, I think kind of reminding them and going through kind of the simple ROI is going to help them, again, understand why you are recommending what you're recommending, and to help kind of give them the bigger picture of what the true costs are of a security attack, or what the cost of breach could have on their business. And ideally, we want to try and show them that it is cheaper to prevent than to pay out. Because if you are still dealing with break-fix customers, a la carte customers, customers that might be in older packages, so they don't map to that advanced package that we just talked about today, then it's pretty much a guarantee that their networks are lacking sufficient proper security protection coverage. They're missing certain security products, services that are now needed for today's climate. And if their network goes offline, it will likely be the result of some sort of cyber security attack, which is going to impact their entire network. And so you're going to see a bunch of screenshots now as I go through a cost of downtime exercise. This calculator is part of the handouts, so make sure if you don't have a copy of this that you download that. But when we're calculating the daily ROI cost, or the cost of downtime as a result of a cybersecurity attack, the formula that I'm using is lost productivity plus lost revenue plus the cost to recover plus the cost of your intangible. And it's really these intangible costs that are the ones that we can't predict. But we do want to highlight for your customer as we are speaking with them, because it's these intangible costs that are probably going to create that extinction event for their business if the worst case scenario happens. So kind of going through a sample exercise. So again, utilizing that formula of downtime cost equals lost productivity plus lost revenue plus cost to recover plus cost of intangibles. We'll kind of start at the top. We'll calculate the employee lost productivity costs. So in this example, let's say that we're talking with an accounting firm. Let's say they have 40 employees. And the average wage cost for these 40 employees is about $50 an hour. And then let's say in our example that one of these employees clicks on a link that they shouldn't have. They received some sort of phishing email. They didn't get any security training. And so they went and clicked on that link and has now sparked this entire chain reaction that has caused the entire network to become locked. And now everybody's seeing this message pop up that they've been hacked and their data has been ransomed. So 100% of their systems are now locked down, no one can work. And then depending on what sort of security report you read, I've seen reports where they say the average length of downtime is anywhere from 3 weeks to 5, 6, 7 weeks. I was just reading one the other day. They're saying the average length of downtime when a company experiences a ransomware attack is 30 days. So I'm going to use that number. So when we look at the total number of downtime hours, I have it at 160 hours. And this is calculated as 8 hours a day times 5 days a week times 4 weeks to kind of get us to our 30 days. So right now, our employee lost productivity cost for this 40 user CPA firm, I have it at $320,000. And I am trying to keep this example as realistic as possible, because even though their system could be offline for 30 days, I'm actually basing the number of downtime hours on actual working days with employees working in the office. And that may or may not be the case. This number could actually be a lot higher depending on the time of year of the attack. Like if this attack happens in April, busiest time of year for CPA firms, you could be working around the clock. So instead of 8 hours a day, the number could be 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. But I didn't do that for this example, again, trying to keep it as realistic as possible. So now let's calculate your customer's potential lost revenue costs when a breach occurs. So let's say the customer's annual gross revenue, $1 million a year. Let's say the number of working days a year, we have it at 240 days, working 8 hours a day. And then let's say that the percentage of lost business is potentially irrecoverable. We have it at 100% because you can see, from some conversations that this customer or this prospect, maybe they don't have a good quality backup in place. They don't have sufficient security measures in place. So lost revenue for the duration of the outage, we have it at, a little over $83,000. Then we want to calculate the remediation costs of your MSP having to come in to try and get them back online because you want to try and help them avoid paying the ransom that's being asked. So using that 160 hours of downtime, but again, this could be higher if it's April, and using an example of $150 an hour as our time material rate, again, this can be higher because you might have to bring in your top engineers who cost more than $150 an hour, which in this instance you likely would. So, even this $150 that I'm using is probably a little bit too conservative. But either way, trying to make it manageable, realistic. The system recovery cost, so your bill to the customer would amount to about $24,000. And so your total cost of downtime, when we add up lost productivity, lost revenue, the total cost of the remediation is a little over $427,000. When we break that down into an hourly cost, it works out to being almost $2,700 per hour. But we know that those aren't the only costs that the customer needs to take into account when they're dealing with a security breach. And so this is where I really want to highlight all of those intangible costs that we have to factor in as well. And so here we're talking about the ransomware payment. Like if you're not able to get all your customers' data back, or if you're not able to get it all back intact, then your customer's only other option might be to try their luck and pay the ransom. And the ransom in 2023 went up quite a bit from 2022. It kind of skyrocketed. It was reported to now be $1.5 million. And when I delivered a previous version of this slide, I think it was 900,000 in 2022. So it almost doubled between 2022 and 2023. And so if you then had to, or if the customer then had to pay you to get their data back, and then they might have to pay the bad guys and hope the data back, then that's a pretty substantial cost, right? And the unfortunate truth is that just paying the ransom no longer necessarily guarantees that the company is going to get their data back. So the company could still pay the ransom and still not get all of your data back. And the customer could be assessed some regulatory fines. Depending on the industry that they're in, the customer could be assessed fines because they didn't take the proper precautions or invest in the proper measures to protect their customers' personal data. When it comes to HIPAA, when it comes to PCI, those governing bodies assess their own fines to guilty parties. We also have crisis communication costs, where you have to, or the organization then has to communicate to their customers in writing that they have been breached. And so there's going to be those additional costs that have to be incurred for printing and posting of those customer letters. There's going to be the HR costs that are then associated with that for handling all of the customer complaints afterwards, which is keeping them from their normal regular activities of their jobs. So there might be a lot of overtime that might have to be paid out. There could be attorney fees, there could be legal costs. If there's class action lawsuits and settlements that are launched by aggrieved customers upon finding out that their data has been stolen and it's been compromised. And those lawsuits, who knows what they can cost? They can cost tens of millions of dollars to settle. Higher insurance premiums could be levied. There could be increase in consultancy costs, employee security training, because if this breach occurred because someone clicked on something they shouldn't have, obviously we need to put some good training in place to teach employees what to look for so that they're not the cause of a subsequent breach. There's likely going to be infrastructure improvements that will have to be needed because ransomware attacks generally expose vulnerabilities in an organization's security infrastructure. And that will likely result in expensive upgrades and new technologies that will have to be implemented to boost their cyber security protection coverage. Obviously, there could be collateral damage because they could be coming after your client, but maybe there's a larger customer that they might be after, like Target. It was their HVAC that was able to get into Target, so there was a lot of collateral damage there. There's also the potential to be threatened again and incur these costs all over again, because once hit, your customer is now on the bad guy's radar. And if your customer doesn't make the investment to fix the underlying issues that caused the attack to happen in the first place, if they don't do that immediately, they could be at risk to being subject to another attack. And then obviously there could likely be reputational damage to their brand, to their business, and that could lead to loss of sales and loss of customers. So really, when you tally kind of all of this up, your customer the breach cost could easily exceed $2 million when you factor in a lot of those costs. And actually, there was an IBM study, and they say that the average cost of a ransomware attack, when they tallied up all of the intangible costs outside of the actual ransomware payment, was $4.6 million. So again, when you look at it from an ROI perspective, your security program at a cost of $250 per user per month for 40 users, it's costing them $10K a month, $120,000 a year. That's nothing compared to the potential cost that a security breach could cost them, because it could be well north of $2 million, or worst case, they can lose their entire livelihood and then the livelihood of their entire staff and their employees if the worst case happenings. So again, really wanting to demonstrate that it is cheaper to prevent than to pay out. Okay. Or what happens if your customer just comes out, bluntly tells you, nah, I don't want to pay that. I'm not really interested in switching over to your new advanced program. You are going to hear this, so you want to be prepared on how you're going to address this. And, the first response that I want to give is, if this is a, legal customer that's telling you this, or if it's a healthcare customer that's telling you this and giving you this pushback, one possible response could be, look, Mr. Customer, your job is to protect your clients. That's my job too. But you're not letting me do my job by refusing to enroll in my new security program that I've developed to better protect all of my customers. And I feel like you're not taking my job seriously as your technology advisor when I bring you recommendations that will help protect your employees and your business. So I really would like you to sign this new agreement for our new advanced cybersecurity program that we're now standardizing all of our clients on moving forward. And, if they're saying, no, we're not going to sign, then ask them when, get them to commit to a timeline and, ask them, if you don't think you can sign today, can we get this signed in 60 days? Can we get this signed in 90 days? Hopefully by giving them that little bit of a window, which makes sense, right? You just want to throw something on them, that they'll get used to that idea and they'll get used to the changes that you're implementing. But if they still refuse to sign, if they won't enroll in your new security program, then we do have to come up with a plan to turn those riskiest of clients into less risk for your organization. Because again, no customer should be allowed to be a threat to your livelihood or the livelihood of your employees. And so, one way to do this, we talked about it earlier, have them sign that new master services agreement that has that limited liability waiver clause or that release of liability clause that you've then incorporated into it, or have them sign that risk acceptance letter along with acknowledgement of, if you're imposing a new rate schedule, which I would, along with a new SLO outlining their new rates, their new response times, should they need to call into support. Because typically for a non-standard client, which is basically what this client is going to become, I have seen MSPs double, triple their time and material rates. So it's not $150 an hour anymore, it's $450 an hour having to deal with a cyber attack or a cyber incident. And really anything could be classified as a cyber incident. And also saying that as a non-standard client, when it comes to our response times, you're at the bottom of the queue because we have our standard customers, our paying customers that get our priority first. So in the event of a cyber attack, these are the customers that we will respond to first, and then it's best efforts when we're able to respond to you. So you need to let them know that because we need to put these clauses in place because it is of utmost importance to remove as much of the risk from your MSP as possible. And so by having customers sign these documents, that is then your proof to show the insurance company that you did attempt to have that security, that risk, that compliance conversation with them, but the customer turned you down. They refused the coverage that you were offering. And this is evidence that you do need to demonstrate to an insurance company in the event that they want to come to you and kind of pin this on you and make you liable. Now, I got the question this morning, so I will head it off at the pass now. The question is, does N-able have sample, hold harmless letter? Does it have sample risk acceptance letters? Does it have sample verbiage for release of liability? Their answer is no, I don't have anything to send out. The reason being is that we are a software company after all, and our legal department won't allow us to send anything like that out because it increases our liability. So we do encourage you, you can Google it, there's lots of examples out there. Google it, do a lot of the legwork, and then work with your legal counsel to help get it embedded into your services contract. But if your customer won't sign with you, they won't sign your new agreement, in my opinion, they don't respect you enough as their IT partner. And therefore, I strongly believe that they're not a good fit for your business. And as hard as it may be, I would tell them that you can't afford the risk anymore and that you can no longer be their MSP. You can no longer keep them on as a client. I know it might have some opposing views with that, but I am all about helping our MSP partners build a better book of business and reduce your risk of liability for your MSP. And so I would tell these clients that, yes, okay, it doesn't look like we're a good fit, not a problem. I'd be happy to transition you over to any other MSP that you choose to go with, and we will help with that transition. So, you know, giving some responses like, you know what, Mr. Customer, I respect your decision, but unfortunately, this is something that we just can't support because it poses a significant amount of risk that we can't be associated with. You know, our job is to protect our clients, protect their business, and by not enrolling in our recommended security program, you're hampering our ability to do what's needed according to security and compliance best practices. So in this instance, I think you might be better suited with another MSP who, you know, doesn't align themselves to the recommended security standards like we do. So ultimately, we do have to let the decision be theirs, but we do need to bring this decision to a close sooner rather than later. I really wouldn't let it linger longer than 60 or 90 days, so I would give them that window. But if you let it go longer than that, you're just putting yourself and your business at risk. The risk of a ransomware attack is just way too high in this day and age. And from experiences that other MSPs have told me, you know, you might be panicking because I'm telling you, you know, churn some clients, fire some clients, but MSPs that have gone through this experience previously, they have told me that, you know, once you tell your customer that you can no longer support them as your client, but you'd be happy to, you know, move them over to somebody else, there is that strong likelihood that they're not going to have the energy to go and find another provider, and they're going to end up signing your agreement. But if they do decide to shop the market, I don't think that's a bad thing. I think hopefully they'll then start engaging with other MSPs that are thinking just like you. You know, they're enforcing the same set of high quality security standards on their customers as well. So it's just going to reinforce your stance and reinforce the customer that this is just the way it is now. Okay. And then lastly, just looking at the top objections that you may hear from a co-managed client. In my co-managed digital playbook, I've outlined 11 of the most common objections. Not going through all of them today. We're just going to focus on the top 3. So one objection that you may hear is, you know, they may tell you, we're already dealing with an MDR service internally. We're working with someone else, so we're good. You know, because maybe they are dealing with another MSP, or maybe they're dealing with another MDR service provider and they're using that platform. So a possible response that you can provide here is, great, you know, acknowledge how wonderful that is. The education part of it is handled for you. You know, it's great that you understand the importance of MDR and why your organization requires it. But do you mind if I ask you a few questions first about the MDR service that you're currently using? I'm curious to hear what their incident response process is like. Like, you know, if a threat is detected in their environment, what happens after that? You know, does the threat get passed over to you and your team to handle, or does the company that you've partnered with deal with the notifications and detections? So depending on your answer, you can provide a little bit of an education around what we refer to as little R response versus big R response. And with the N-able MDR service, we provide that big R response. So say they come back to you with a response where they tell you that with their current MDR service, when the provider detects a threat, they create and send over a ticket for their team to handle. So the best type of response that you can provide when you hear this, and again, all of this is in the co-managed digital playbook, you can say, you know, with our MDR service, we provide our customers what we call the big R response, versus what it sounds like what you're getting from the service you're dealing with today is the little R response. Because are you aware as to how fast a vulnerability can move its way throughout an environment? Like when a threat is detected by the system, this is where time is your enemy. That threat needs to be neutralized. It needs to be halted as quickly as possible, because it only takes minutes before then your whole network and the important company data that you rely upon could then be wiped out. So if your MDR service provides you a ticket at say 3 a.m. to warn you of an event that's happening in your environment, and you're sleeping, or the person that's responsible might be sleeping or not responding, then you may be walking into a pretty serious security situation when you get into the office the next morning. Or what happens if that alert comes in over the weekend, or it comes in during a holiday? Then the quality of life of your staff may be compromised if your team is expected to kind of work around the clock, because they're on edge, wondering when the next notification or that next ticket is going to come in. So this is where you can kind of compare it to the N-able MDR service and say, look, it's great that you have an MDR service in place, but if it's only an alert factory where you are then responsible for dealing with the alerts that you receive via the tickets, then that's not actually really helpful to you or your team, because there's a risk that it may take some time before anyone on your team becomes available to address the alerts that are coming in and the tickets you receive. And then who knows what kind of damage may have been occurred by that point. So this is where you can start promoting the N-able MDR service and say, let our MSP take over this function for you with our service. The difference with our service is we have a human intervention piece. We have a team working around the clock that's going to take that corrective action on your behalf to neutralize and stop any breaches that might be occurring. We have dedicated SOC and cybersecurity analysts that can augment your team and intervene to complete the actual security work for you, instead of just throwing what's detected over the fence for your team to deal with. And so this will afford your team with a better work-life balance and improve the operational efficiencies and allow your team to really focus on maybe things that they want to work on. Like maybe there's some strategic projects they're trying to work on, but they can't really make a lot of progress about because they're being continually distracted with all the different alerts that are coming in. Or maybe you get told, yeah, we're okay. We have a dedicated internal security staff already, so we don't need the services of an MSP at this time for security purposes. And so if you hear this, that they have people on site already doing their security, we want to dig a little bit deeper and really see, what does this actually look like? So again, congratulating on that, but asking, do you mind if I ask a few questions? Because I want to get an understanding of what this actually looks like for you. So you want to find out, how many cyber specialists do they currently have on their team? How many hours do they work? Do they work a standard 8x5 shift, or are you running multiple shifts? Are there any feelings being expressed where the team is feeling overwhelmed and overworked? And if they do, this is where you can create space for them. You can be their backup, so they can take holidays, vacation, personal days, sick days, and not have it impact the rest of the team. And you want to ask these questions because it takes minimum 5 SOC analysts to run a 24/7, 365 SOC department. And that's assuming that no one ever gets sick and no one ever takes a vacation. And this requirement is not just based on the number of users or number of endpoints that the organization that you're speaking with has, but it's just what is needed to run a SOC around the clock every day of every year. And a fully burdened individual SOC security analyst, it's costing about $150,000 a year or more. And if you look on Indeed, or if you look on any other sort of job site, you can see that there's so many people looking for SOC analysts to the actual people that are qualified to be a SOC analyst. So if the organization currently has a SOC with security staff, then we need to kind of find out what the makeup of that is, and are they going to be able to scale? Because if they're only operating 8x5 today, Or if they're looking to scale, one, where are they going to find the people? But here, you know, especially if they're only operating 8x5, you can step in, you can offer to support them on the evenings, on the weekends, and the holidays, because security never sleeps, right? You know, the organization still needs eyes watching everything, even in the overnight hours. And so you can step in and offer to assist with that. And then again, you may get that pricing objection again, right? You know, this is expensive. We don't have the budget for this. This is where we want to go back to the ROI example from earlier. A lot of the same example, the exercise still applies here. You want to sit down, review with the IT director, the CEO, what the true costs are of the security breach, highlighting that it will be actually cheaper to partner with you than to pay out after the fact. And so again, kind of going back to our initial slide from earlier, when we combined the IBM costs of all those intangibles, you know, they're saying it's 4.6 million. If we add that to the average ransomware payment for 2023 of being 1.5 million, the total breach cost could be northwards of 6 million. And when you compare to what you're actually charging for this service, for 125 user organization at $90 a user, it's going to cost $135,000 a year, again, proving that it is cheaper to prevent than to pay out. And so your response could then be, you know, is the $90 per user that I'm charging per month for MDR service really that much more expensive than your organization suffering a breach that could cost northwards of 6 million? Or worst case, again, it could cost your reputation, it could cost the livelihood of you and your customers. And for the annual cost of $135,000, it's not even possible to hire one qualified cybersecurity analyst for your organization, let alone where we need, you know, kind of 5 to work around the clock. And so for the $135,000 per year, you are actually gaining access to an entire team on a 24/7 basis of security personnel and the security monitoring, the reporting, the log correlation software on top of that. So it's giving you kind of a full SOC, a full SIM at a fraction of the price if you had to build and implement that on your own. And bringing in the partnership, we are going to be working alongside of you every step of the way, supporting your security and requirements. And then lastly, you may hear, you're just trying to make me look bad. You know, you're just trying to make me and my team look incompetent. And the response that you can give is, no, we are not. We actually want to make you look knowledgeable and informed in front of your CEO. You know, we have dashboard access, our response actions, that can all be tailored on how involved or how hands-off you want to be with this. And then based on your requirements, we can customize the response plan to align to what makes the most sense for you. We can set up the rules of engagement based on what, you know, you're going to do or what you want us to do when a breach occurs. And you can reinforce that with our service, we really pride ourselves on providing our customers with equitable access to all of the data. We're both going to have access to the data in the event of the breach. Okay. So again, I covered a lot of stuff in today's boot camp, but there's a brand new guide that hopefully I'll have available, just putting the finishing touches on it, hopefully tomorrow or Friday. I call it the Defend and Prosper, Maximizing the Cybersecurity Sales Opportunity. It's a brand new guide that I will be sending out to everybody who attended today's boot camp. All right, so just kind of some bullet points on, you know, what do we do next now that we're wrapping things up. If you want to retake this boot camp, if you want a copy of the recording, it'll take a couple of weeks to get uploaded to N-able U. Just put boot camp recording in the question panel. I will get the raw version sent over to you. I also have a lot of boot camps around this in much greater detail that you can go check out on N-able U. Lewis has a lot of boot camps that you can check out on N-able U as well. If you haven't had a chance, download the co-managed digital playbook, the costing calculator, the ROI calculator, all of those different tools that we referenced today. And if you have any questions, work with your partner success manager, email me, connect with me on LinkedIn, or register for my next round of office hours. All right, so thank you everyone for your time, for being with us this afternoon. Absolutely appreciated. My contact information is there if anybody has some questions that they want to send to me. Connect with me on LinkedIn. I post a lot of good information and boot camp reminders there. So enjoy the rest of your day, enjoy the rest of the week. Take care. Thanks everyone.